The moment I set the casserole dish down on my mother-in-law's kitchen counter. Is that it? Not hello. Not thank you for driving 2 hours in November to get here. Not even a glance at what I'd actually brought. Just those 3 words, from my sister-in-law Petra, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed and her head tilted like I'd shown up with a bag of gas station sandwiches. I'd spent the better part of Thursday making that dish. A proper tourtière, flaky pastry, seasoned ground pork and beef, the filling spiced exactly the way my own mother taught me when I was 12 years old. I'd made 2 of them, 2 large pie size enough to feed 12 people easily, wrapped in dish towels to keep warm in the car. I'd also brought a full tray of butter tarts, a green salad with homemade dressing in a mason jar, and a bottle of ice wine from the Niagara region that cost me $63. $63. And the first thing out of Petra's mouth was, "Is that it?" I told myself to breathe. I told myself it was the holidays and people get stressed, and maybe she was having a bad day. I unwrapped the pies and set them on the counter properly and said, "Yes, that's the tourtière. I hope everyone's hungry. It should still be warm." My mother-in-law came in from the living room then. She looked at the pies. She picked up the edge of the crust on the first one with her fingernail, the way you'd prod something suspicious at a yard sale. And she said, "It looks a bit flat, doesn't it? Last year yours was fluffier." I don't know what that means, honestly. Tourtière is not a dish that is meant to be fluffy. It's a meat pie. It has a top and a bottom crust and filling in between, and it is not supposed to rise like a soufflé. But I smiled and I said, "Well, I hope it still tastes good." And I went back out to the car to get the butter tarts and the wine. Standing in the driveway for a moment, in the cold, I took a breath of that sharp November air and looked up at the gray Alberta sky and told myself, "You can do this. 4 hours, maybe 5. You can get through 5 hours." I should have just gotten back in the car and driven home. My husband's family is not an easy family. I want to be fair about that. No family is easy, including mine. But there is a specific kind of difficult that his family practices, a kind of low-grade constant criticism that gets delivered with a smile. So that if you ever try to describe it to someone else, you sound unreasonable. Like, yes, technically she was smiling when she said it. But you'd have to have been there to understand the smile. My mother-in-law has never fully accepted that her son married me. This has been made clear in 100 small ways over the 6 years we've been together. The comments about my cooking, the way she talks about his ex-girlfriend from university, she was such a sweetheart, so easy to be around, at least once per visit. The time she told me, quite sincerely, that I'd chosen a very ambitious hairstyle, the week I got a simple trim. I've learned to let most of it go. My husband, Cole, is a good man and he loves me and he tries. But there is something about a person's parents that short-circuits even the best people. He's told her to back off. It helps for about 2 weeks and then it slides back to the way it always is. That's just how it goes sometimes. Petra is cut from the same cloth. She's 4 years older than Cole, lives 15 minutes from their parents, and has a habit of making me feel like a house guest at family functions, tolerated but not quite belonging. She has her own opinions about how things should be done, how food should be prepared, which stores are worth shopping at, and she delivers these opinions constantly freely to whoever will listen. The 2 of them together, my mother-in-law and Petra, are a force. Cole's father is another story. He's a quiet man. Dennis Sr., retired from the oil industry, spends most of his time in the garage or watching hockey. He nods when I talk to him. He eats whatever is put in front of him without comment. He has never once in 6 years said anything unkind to me. I have always liked him for that. Dinner that evening was meant to be at 6 o'clock. By the time everyone arrived, Cole's uncle and aunt from Red Deer, Petra's husband and their 2 kids, a family friend named Wallace who I'd never met before, it was closer to 6:45. My pies had been sitting on the counter since I arrived at 4. I'd asked twice if we should put them in the oven to warm up, and both times my mother-in-law had said, "Oh, they'll be fine, don't fuss." They were not fine. By the time everything was on the table, the tourtière was lukewarm at best. The pastry had gone a bit soft. I knew, looking at it, that it would not taste the way I'd intended, and I knew, before a single bite was taken, that this would be mentioned. I was right. "It's a bit soggy, isn't it?" Petra said with her fork poised above her slice, to no one in particular. "Did something happen to it?" I said very calmly that it probably needed to go back in the oven for a few minutes, that it had been sitting out for a while. "You should have put it in when you got here," my mother-in-law said. "Not mean exactly. Just matter of fact. The way you'd say it's raining while pointing at rain." "I did ask," I said, and then I stopped, because I knew how that sentence was going to land. There was a pause. Cole put his hand briefly on my knee under the table. The uncle from Red Deer, bless him, said the filling tasted excellent and helped himself to a second slice. His wife nodded enthusiastically and asked for the recipe. I gave it to her. Grateful talked for a few minutes about how her own mother used to make tourtière, and how it's a dying art, really, and that small conversation was the warmest moment of my entire evening. After dinner, while people were milling around with coffee and the butter tarts had been eaten, every single one, without comment or credit, my mother-in-law pulled me aside near the kitchen. She said, "Next time, maybe you should just bring a store-bought dessert. Something reliable. People know what they're getting with a Costco pie." I looked at her. I thought about the Thursday I'd spent in my kitchen, the hour I'd spent on the crust alone, making sure the fat was cold, the way my mother had insisted, cutting it in until it looked like rough gravel. The 2 trips I'd made to different grocery stores because the first one was out of the right cut of pork. "Sure," I said. "I'll keep that in mind." I found Cole in the living room and I whispered, "I need some air." And I went and stood on the back deck in the cold for 5 minutes, and when I came back in, my face was under control again. The drive home that night was quiet for the first 40 minutes. Cole drove. I watched the highway lights go past and thought about nothing in particular, or tried to. After a while he said, "She didn't mean it as badly as it came out." "She meant every word," I said. Not angrily, just accurately. He was quiet again then. "I know. I'm sorry, you don't have to keep apologizing for her, I know that too." We didn't talk much after that. Not because we were fighting, we weren't, but because there's a particular kind of exhaustion that visits after that kind of evening. And neither of us had the energy to push through it. We got home, we fed the cat, we watched half an episode of something neither of us can now remember, and we went to bed. In the morning over coffee, Cole asked what I wanted to do about Christmas. I told him I wanted to think about it. Christmas at his parents' place had been the plan since September. I'd agreed to it back then without really thinking it through, the way you agree to things that are 2 months away. By the time December arrived, I was dreading it, in the specific way you dread something that is both unpleasant and unavoidable. But here is what changed. The week before Christmas, I found out that Petra had been hosting what she called a pre-Christmas brunch at her place for the family. My mother-in-law, her husband, some of the cousins. She hadn't mentioned it to us. Cole hadn't been invited. I only found out because Cole's aunt from Red Deer texted him to say she was sorry she'd miss him at Petra's thing, but she'd see him Christmas Day. Cole said he was sure it was just an oversight. I looked at my husband, who is a genuinely good-hearted person, and I thought, how many oversights does it take before it stops being an oversight? But I said, "Okay, I'm sure you're right." And I went and I started organizing what I was going to bring for Christmas dinner. Because that's what I do. I keep showing up, I keep trying, I keep bringing the tourtière even when no one appreciates it. That year, I decided to go all out. I'd been planning it for 2 weeks. Homemade dinner rolls. A full glazed ham with a brown sugar and Dijon crust. A proper trifle for dessert, the English kind my grandmother used to make with actual custard and real whipped cream. I'd already bought most of the ingredients. The ham was in my fridge, 8 pounds, from the good butcher on the other side of the city. 3 days before Christmas, Cole's mom called. She said she wanted to coordinate the menu. She'd been thinking, she said, that maybe the family had outgrown the potluck format. She said she was going to do a honey garlic ham herself, and that Petra was bringing her signature apple crumble, and that it would be lovely if I could just bring something light, like a salad or a vegetable tray. A vegetable tray. "Oh," I said. I'd already planned to bring a ham, actually, and some rolls and a trifle. Silence. Then, "Well, we can't have 2 hams." "I know," I said. "I could bring the ham and you could do something else." "It's all ready." "I think it makes more sense for me to do the main," she said. "I know what everyone likes." I stood there in my kitchen with the phone against my ear, and I looked at the ham in my fridge and I thought, this is not about the ham. It has never been about the ham or the tourtière or any of the food, ever. It's about the fact that she has decided I do not belong in this family, and everything I do, every dish I bring, every effort I make, will always be managed, minimized, redirected, criticized, or ignored. Not because there is anything wrong with what I bring, but because allowing it to be good would mean acknowledging that I am someone worth welcoming. "You know what?" I said. "That's fine. We'll just come empty-handed then." She laughed a little. "Oh, you don't have to do that. Just bring the salad. I don't think we'll be making it, actually," I said. "I'm so sorry something's come up." She stopped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I don't think we'll be there for Christmas." "I'm sorry for the short notice. Merry Christmas." And I hung up. I stood there for a moment in the kitchen, heart going faster than it should have been. The cat was sitting on the counter watching me. Outside it was snowing. The real thick kind that sticks to everything. Then I called my own mother. She answered on the second ring. The ham, the salad, the years of it, all of it, faster than I meant to. She was quiet for a second and then she said, "Well, come here then. Bring the ham." So I did. Cole took some convincing. Not because he wanted to go to his parents. I think some part of him had been dreading it too, quietly, in the way we don't always say out loud. But because he's someone who finds it hard to disappoint his family, even when his family doesn't extend him the same consideration. We talked for a long time that night. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just told him, carefully and clearly, what the last 6 years had looked like from where I was standing. And I said I needed one Christmas where I wasn't managed and criticized and handed a vegetable tray. He said, "You're right," and he called his mom back. I did not hear that conversation. I went into the bedroom and I lay on the bed, and I looked at the ceiling and I listened to the low sound of his voice from the other room and I thought, whatever happens next, I'll be okay. He came in after about 20 minutes. He sat on the edge of the bed. "She's upset," he said. "I know. She says she doesn't understand why we'd go to your mother's instead of coming home. This is our home," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "I know that too. We drove to my mother's place on Christmas Eve. She lives about 90 minutes east in a small town outside of Peterborough, Ontario. It snowed the whole way. Cole drove and I sat in the passenger seat with the ham in a cooler in the back and a grocery bag of baking between my feet, and for the first time in a long time I felt like I could breathe. My mother had put up a tree. She'd made mulled wine that smelled like cinnamon and star anise all the way from the front door. My younger brother Theo was already there with his girlfriend, and my aunt from down the road came by later in the evening with shortbread and a very loud opinion about the hockey season, and we sat around the kitchen table until well after midnight just talking. Cole fit in the way he always does with my family. Easily, without effort, the way a person does when they're not being watched and measured. He and Theo talked for almost 2 hours about cars, and I could hear them laughing from the next room. Christmas mornings I made the ham, brown sugar, Dijon, a bit of apple cider vinegar in the glaze. 8 pounds, 3.5 hours in the oven. My mother made scalloped potatoes and a green bean dish, and my aunt brought more shortbread than anyone could reasonably eat. Cole made the gravy. My brother's girlfriend, who I'd been worried might feel awkward, turned out to be exactly the kind of person who rolls up her sleeves and asks what she can do. And we gave her the trifle to assemble, and she took it extremely seriously, and did a beautiful job. We ate at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, all of us around my mother's table with the good dishes out and the snow piling up against the windows outside, and it was, without question, the best Christmas I had had in years. Cole's mother called on Boxing Day. I let it go to voicemail. Cole listened to the message and said she wanted to know if we could sort things out and come over for a late Christmas get-together. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to know if she actually wants to sort things out," I said, "or if she wants us to come over so she can tell me it's all a misunderstanding." He didn't answer right away, which was an answer. I said, "Okay, tell her we'd like to talk, but not at her house, somewhere neutral, somewhere we could have an actual conversation." She agreed, eventually. It took a couple of days of back and forth through Cole, but she agreed. We met at a Tim Hortons, halfway between our place and hers, which I will admit is not where I imagined this conversation happening. But it was neutral, and it was public, and there were enough people around that no one was going to make a scene. She came in with Petra, which I had not expected. I had told myself beforehand to stay calm, to say what I needed to say, and then stop talking and let her respond and not fill the silence. I'm someone who fills the silence. I've been working on it. I told her, as plainly as I could, that I felt unwelcome at family events, that I felt my contributions were consistently dismissed or redirected, that the tourtière comment last month had been the latest in a long series of things that had made me feel like an outsider, and that being told to bring a vegetable tray for Christmas after 6 years of trying felt like the final confirmation of something I had been trying not to see. She listened. Her face was hard to read. Then she said, "I never meant for you to feel that way. I just have high standards. I'm like that with everyone." Petra nodded. I thought about that for a moment, about whether it was true, and whether it mattered. Even if it was true, even if she'd have said those things to anyone, the effect was the same. The effect on me was the same. The years of it were the same. "I believe you," I said. "And I need you to understand that it doesn't matter to me whether it was intended. What matters is that I've spent 6 years bringing my best to this family and feeling like it never landed. I'd like that to change." She was quiet for a longer moment than I expected. Then she said, "The tourtière was actually good. I'm not good at saying that, I suppose." Petra looked at her mother. Something shifted slightly in her face. "No," she said, "you're not." I think that surprised all three of us. I'm not going to tell you that everything changed after that conversation. Life doesn't work in sudden reversals. My mother-in-law is still who she is. Petra is still who she is. The next family dinner was still a bit stiff. She made a comment about my coat that I chose to let go. Cole squeezed my hand when she said it, which is its own kind of progress. But she did call me, about 3 weeks later, and ask if I would share the tortilla recipe with her, not through Cole. Me, directly. She called my number. I stood in my kitchen with the phone in my hand for a second before I answered, genuinely startled. I gave her the recipe. I even told her the trick with the cold fat and the pastry, the part my mother had taught me when I was 12. She listened, and asked one question and said, "Thank you, that's helpful." "Good luck with it," I said, and I meant it. I don't know where we go from here. I know that I am not responsible for making myself smaller so that someone else feels more comfortable. I know that showing up with good food and good intentions is still worth doing, but not at the cost of my own dignity. I know that Cole and I had the most peaceful Christmas we have ever had. Eating ham around my mother's table, with mismatched chairs pulled up from the back room, and my aunt arguing about hockey and the snow thick against the window glass. And I know that if she makes that tortilla and it turns out well, some small part of her will know exactly where she learned how. Maybe that's enough. For now, maybe that's exactly enough.